Let us talk now for a few minutes that we have left with Josh Caplan over at Vessel News. He's up in Montreal, and he's covered two stories that the mainstream media is trying to avoid. Josh, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Let's start with Israel, which we've certainly covered a lot the last 2 days on this show. But you said there was a nice, heartwarming story that would have been front-page news if it had been Barack Obama doing it, but because it's President Trump, silence from the mainstream media. Tell us about it.
Absolutely. So late last night, a publication out of Israel named the Yeshiva World published the first story about President Trump while having a very jam-packed schedule in Israel, meeting a 14-year-old girl by the name of Emily Inbar, battling cancer for the past 7 years. And she stated her dream was to meet Donald Trump. And, of course, the president made time to see her. And also the First Lady was there. Netanyahu was present. And as you had stated earlier, this would have garnered international fuzzy headlines from all of the usual suspects in the mainstream media. But Yeshiva World was the only publication, when I did a quick Google search, that had covered this after about 4 or 5 hours. So I took that information, threw it up on the Gateway Pundit, and right now it's made its way around the blogosphere. I know Sean Hannity just covered the exact same story, so it's getting out there.
Great. And Yeshiva, I thought Yeshiva World was in New York, but I guess it's in Israel. I didn't know that. I've seen their stuff periodically, but I guess most people do not. And wow, and she had wanted to meet Trump for years, well before he was even considering being president. I guess he sort of considered it 5 years ago.
He was, of course, as everybody knows, he was, quite famous before becoming president with his blockbuster television show, and it's actually been quite popular, The Apprentice there, and among all ages. So she wanted to meet Trump, and Trump gave her the opportunity, and I'm surprised not even those in the pro-Trump movement, media-wise, didn't pick this up. But we got it done on the Gateway Pundit, and it's making its way around. And as you and I talked offline, I think the Trump media strategy needs to switch gears and start talking about many of these feel-good stories that Trump undertakes behind the scenes, because right now the mainstream media is coming at him harder than ever. So these stories must get out.
Well, I'm sure it'll get coverage maybe from ABC. I could see some mainstream outlet like maybe Jake Tapper talking about the cynicism of this photo op by President Trump. How shameless is it that he is using cancer patients to distract from Russia or something like that. I mean, nothing would surprise me with these people, but pretty thoughtful way of spending his time.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about another story that is now being linked by the fake news to Trump, the story in Montana, where you, at least as far as I'm concerned, broke the story that the body slam, or the hands on the neck specifically, by the Montana congressional candidate, Gianforte, who's the Republican, didn't, on second thought, really weren't grabbing him by the neck. Tell us what's going on there in the latest from Montana.
Sure, exactly. So all eyes are on this special election in Montana right now. Of course, we have Greg Gianforte, who is embroiled in a scandal. He allegedly body slammed a Guardian reporter by the name of Ben Jacobs, and a Fox News reporter who stated that she was present when the altercation took place, who goes by the name of Alicia Asuna, stated on Laura Ingram's show today that she had misrepresented and inaccurately reported on what the GOP candidate had actually done to Ben Jacobs. And I'll read a very short interjection between the two. So basically, the Fox News reporter is stating that, the one thing that I had said, I saw both of his hands go up, but truthfully it wasn't around his neck in a strangling type of way, but more just on the side of his neck, just grabbed him, and I guess I couldn't have seen it because of his clothes. I don't know. So now on the Laura Ingraham show, this Fox News reporter is stepping back from her initial report on what had transpired.
To me, the issue isn't necessarily what Gianforte did to this guy. What's his name again? It's
Ben Jacobs.
Ben Jacobs. But what Jacobs did to Gianforte, because, I mean, I know enough about law to know that it's a battery from a tort standpoint, even if it's not a prosecutable crime, for him to just touch him in a way that's offensive. And that seems to be what happened. I mean, it seems like microphone stuck in his face when he was in the room when he shouldn't have been, and he got a little too pushy. And then Gianforte, who I guess is not as polished as one would hope for a congressman, I think we can agree on that, pushed it away. And, but he had a right to do that, and somehow it turned into his wrist being grabbed, maybe out of concern for the microphone or the iPhone or whatever, that he should have been a little more concerned about when he was sticking it inappropriately in his face. And once there was bodily contact, Gianforte had a right to respond, even if he didn't necessarily have a right to body slam him or punch him, which is also being alleged. All I know is that I suspect this is going to make him more popular and make his victory margin a little higher than it might otherwise have been.
Well, that's certainly possible, and as you and I touched on this offline, is right now you're seeing a lot of outpour of support from those in the media, but very little concern from those on the right. And why is that? It's because guys like Ben Jacobs have done everything in their power to undermine the Trump presidency, to put down the Trump train and the deplorables, and tell them, don't believe what your lying eyes see. We know all. So that's why you're not hearing very many people on the right saying, well, you shouldn't attack a guy like Ben Jacobs. Well, Ben Jacobs is part of this anemic, systemic problem of the mainstream media misrepresenting and lying at every chance they get. And it really does speak volumes for the condition of the mainstream media when instead of there being an outpouring against Gianforte, there's actually being a lot of vitriol pointed towards Jacobs and his profession.
Probably, and to be a little bit fair to him, two things. One, the Guardian doesn't really present itself as mainstream media. They're pretty openly far left, so I don't think it's so egregious when they do it. It's like The Nation or something. If they have really left-wing coverage, it bothers me more when ABC, CBS, those who pretend to be mainstream do the kinds of things they do. The Guardian is The Guardian, and what do you expect? And the other thing is, whether someone put them up to do it to create a scandal, I'm not buying it. I guess some have speculated, including myself early on, that someone, said, oh, let's cause this scandal because, one, you can't expect a politician would react that, let's face it, stupidly and angrily. I mean, frankly, he should have had his people handle it. That was very sloppy of Gianforte. And they wouldn't do it this close to the election. The reality is they don't have enough time for it to get the desired effect. In terms of, they would have planned it 3 days before an election if you want a dirty trick before then so you can bust people in, whatever, make it more of a spectacle. It's, too late right now. I don't know. That's just my view. By the way, in closing here, Josh, you're Jewish, I'm Jewish, we're both familiar with Passover. If you want to see how lame this guy Jacobs is, read his piece about his guide to a Passover Seder. In The Guardian a few years ago. It's just like, don't mention Israel, and just he's talking about the brisket. It's just so lame. It's worth seeing just to see what kind of guy this is. Any final thoughts before I let you go? And thank you again for coming on.
Well, look, it's always good to hop on and chat with you. And just going back to right now what we're seeing from, as Hannity calls it now, the destroy Trump media, we're seeing today many reports coming out of Brussels that Trump's trip to visit NATO has been a disaster. My point on this is that he is one of the bravest leaders that the West has seen in decades, staring down tens of leaders telling them that they have to now boost up their spending in NATO at least to 2% GDP, something Obama could have never, ever done. So while there's a whole lot of noise out there, let's focus on this. He looked everybody in the eye and said, step up. Pay your fair share if you want the protection in which the covenants in the NATO agreement stipulate. So, again, I think a successful trip once more that the mainstream media is trying to distort.
Josh D. Caplan with a C on Twitter, Vessel News on Twitter. In other words, Josh Caplan, who runs Vessel News. It's been great having you on, and thank you.